We've had founders who are from Fund One, which is 10 years old now, who have been the most armored cockroaches out there.
Nuclear blast after nuclear blast.
Just keeps taking it. COVID nearly shut the company down. Market downturn nearly shuts the company down. This founder actually just recently got a $2 million contract. Part of me is like, wow, that's amazing to see that over all this time, and now it's starting to turn the corner. Do I think it was worth all the pain and suffering of like 7 of those 9 years? Probably not.
This is Danielle Strachman, and she is one of the co-founders and general partners at 1517 Fund. Let's just start off with the idea behind the Medici grants and like how young can you kind of get people interested in building interesting projects?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think young people are often very interested in building projects, and especially if you look at little kids, they're always interested in building and making. So I think a lot of what we do is more about trying to get to the essence of how humans naturally are before all these systems get layered on top of them and stop them from doing the things that they would naturally do. But to go back to the Medici project, I think one of our thesis areas is essentially, and we saw this all the way back at the Thiel Foundation days when I was working on the Thiel Fellowship, that young people are using getting money as an award for like a prize of something they made. But they're not used to getting money to say, hey, you have potential and we think you could do something, which also means that if you're winning awards, you already had to have the resources to do the things you're doing. And there's so much talent out there. And if you just give them resources, mentorship, permission to build, you get very surprised by what people do. Now, one of the learnings at the Thiel Foundation that we had over the first 5 years that myself and my colleague Michael were there was that we kind of started getting this itch to scratch of, well, maybe people don't need $100,000 to get started. Maybe a smaller amount actually helps them move forward as well. So we had one of our Thiel summits the last year that we were there, and we had a session where teens could come and talk to us about an idea. You know, we didn't call it a pitch session or anything like that. We didn't want the pressure, but hey, come talk to us about an idea that you have. And, you know, for 10 of these teens, we'll give them $1,000 to get started on something.
And how many kids came that initial year?
Oh gosh, that event, that was probably one of our last Thiel summits, and is probably around like 350, 400 young people.
So it's like what is that, 0.5% rate, or not 0.5%, but like 2% rate maybe?
It's a small rate, but also not all the people at the event were wanting, you know, $1,000 for something. But we had a bunch of young people who came up and talked to us about what they were thinking about working on. And we had one young man, Max Locke, who is an entrepreneur who started a freight forwarding company. But let me go backwards for a second. When he was in high school, he started an ice cream company, and he's a total ice cream geek. I remember once I was asking him about some brand of ice cream, and he corrected me. He said, Danielle, that's not ice cream, that's frozen dessert. That's different because the ratio of cream to air is not proper for ice cream. And I was like,
do you remember the brand?
Okay, I don't remember. What he had figured out with his ice cream company was that actually getting like cup cones and wrappers out there was really hard, and doing the shipping was tough. And he was in a public high school trying to call manufacturing facilities in China and doing all this stuff. So he ended up starting his own freight forwarder, but he had no money to start it. And he came to this event that we had, and we gave him $1,000 to get started on this. He actually then went to TechCrunch Disrupt. He didn't win the startup battlefield, but he came in really close. And there was an investor in the audience who noticed him and then decided to put a little bit of money in. So this is before we started 1517. And it was interesting. We ended up starting 1517 shortly thereafter. But one of the learnings was, wow, like we gave this young man $1,000 and he was able to actually kickstart himself to go even further than he had before. And so it's this idea of that, like a small amount of money, it's really this belief capital that and we used to call it, we didn't call it the Medici project until maybe 5 years ago, something like that. We used to call it a nudge grant. It's like, this is just to nudge somebody like off the side.
Why'd you decide to switch it?
I'm trying to remember why we did, and we just called it our grant. Like we didn't advertise it. Yeah. It was very much a surprise attack. I'd be talking to someone like this. They'd be telling me about something they wanted to build, and I'd be like, "Oh, what would you do with $1,000?" And they didn't know anything about our grants, and we weren't telling people about our grants. They'd tell me something, and I say, "Hey, I'm going to give you $1,000. What's your Venmo?" They were like, what is happening right now? We've had people laugh. We've had people cry, just being amazed. And after a while, we thought, maybe we should name this something. So about 5 years in, we decided to call it the Medici Project. But it's been interesting because we've had a number of successful companies start as Medici grantees with us. And the grant is really to start a project. It's not to start a company. It just so happens that these projects ended up turning into companies. So one of them is a company called Deep Gram. That's a Series C company now. This young man, Noah, wanted to work on an algorithm. This is almost 10 years ago. He was at University of Michigan. He told us about what he wanted to build in a frat house in a room with a pair of pants in it and like a sort of a defunct library. It was a very strange space.
When you walk into this space, like what is the first thought in your mind?
So first off, you're going to love this. So this is the Shift House, the old Shift House in Michigan. Shift is a creator community and they have sort of a frat house where they do things. And when we started 1517, we really had no money to do what we were doing. Even when we raised the fund, a $20 million fund, you don't have like big management fees to be flying all over the world and staying in hotels and doing large events and all kinds of stuff. And I'm really like, I'm a cheap person. I'm a really cheap person, especially when it comes, and I'd like to say frugal, but in this regard, I'm actually cheap.
What's the difference in your mind between cheap and frugal?
So we've come to a distinction on our team about this. Like frugal is thoughtful. Cheap can sometimes be dumb. So for example, recently I went to a conference and I was being cheap and I decided to get this hotel and it turned out to be in a pretty dangerous neighborhood in LA. This was like a few months ago. So I did not need to do this. I didn't need to save these pennies for 1517, but it's just built into my nature. That was dumb to the point where literally in the middle of the night, I would wake up and like hear some form of like party or something happening in the parking lot. No violence.
No.
But I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to a different hotel tomorrow. Let's not do this. But back in the old days of 1517, there were lots of good reasons to be cheap. Although after a while, Michael was like, listen, I'm booking the hotels we stay at from now on. So anyways, to make a long story or segue short.
Decision.
Yeah, no, he picks nicer places than I do. And I'm like, how much does this place cost? But, we've worked it out on our team. But at the time, I had actually finished reading this book called The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer, who is a entertainer and performer. And she does a lot of things where she's built a lot of community with her fans. And so she'll ask fans like, hey, I need a place to stay in this city or town. Does someone want to give me a couch? And I was like, I wonder if we can do this. And so I remember reaching out to some of the people at Shift and I was like, hey, me and Michael are coming to town and can we stay at the house? I just asked. And they said, yes, sure. And it was hilarious because they had a huge party this one night that we were in house. And this is when MHACs, was one of like the only hackathons out there. They were getting started. Dave Fontenot was like spearheading MHACs at the time. I've known Dave since he was 18, maybe even younger. And so we went out for that. But we get this text from one of the Shift creators, and they said, hey, if it gets too loud tonight, let me know. And they gave us, I got this like attic room that was really cool. And Michael stayed in this young man, I think his name's Tom, in his room, in his bed. Tom uses a deaf person's alarm clock that shakes the bed in the morning because he's so bad at getting up. So Michael, the first morning, apparently was shaken out of bed.
Startled him a little bit.
And startled. The second night, they have this total rager. It was an insane party. And I'm up in this like attic bedroom. Michael is texting me, hey, the bathroom downstairs flooded or broke. And so all the young people for this party are coming through my room because it's the only other bathroom and I can't sleep. And I start laughing. I was like, oh my God, I got to go downstairs. So I have like pajamas on. I go downstairs. I'm also cognizant of people know me as the director of the Thiel Fellowship. Some of these are hackers and makers that I've come across many times before. They're having a huge party at this house that goes late into the night. I run into Dave actually, and I'm like kind of almost trying not even to make eye contact because I'm like, oh my God, I don't want Dave to feel like he has to be on in a certain way right now. What's going on? I talked to Michael. He's like, this is ridiculous. Like I was sitting in his room talking to him when these two girls walked in, used the bathroom, whispered to each other afterwards, hey, like, don't flush, we'll wake him up. And it was one of the most hilarious 15, 17 moments of staying there. And then that morning, this guy, Noah Shuddy, talked to us about this algorithm that he wanted to build. And this is in this room with a pair of pants that were clearly left there after this frat party and a belt. And so for us, it was just like, oh yeah, of course we're taking this meeting here in this room because we've stayed at this frat house for 2 days, hung out here with everybody. It was so wonderful. People were so generous with us. And yeah, that's how we met one of our grantees. And so like, this is some of the way that we do things at 15, 17 is by being very real with people, sometimes asking for ridiculous things, and sometimes people say yes. Another one of our grantees is Ethan from Mock Industries. We offered Ethan a grant when he was in high school to work on a novel rifle, and that kind of
like
matriculated, if you will, into what has become Mock Industries today. And we were the first check into that company. But it's interesting because with our grants, like, again, it's about a project and giving a young person a resource. So I have a young lady that I've been mentoring right now, and she wrote in, and it sounds ridiculous when I say it, but she wrote in and said, hey, I saw your grant. She's 16. I make hyper realistic stuffed animals, and I'd love to talk about this. And I was like, well, this is unique. And this is something we look for at 15, 17 overall, whether our founders or grantees or really anyone in our community, is like very unique stuff. And I thought to myself, and this was just a couple months ago, that, well, I have not been pitched in any form on hyper-realistic stuffed animals. I have to take a call with her. I have to find out more. So I get on a call with her, and her first words were, I don't know how to do this. I've never been on a call like this. And I was like, okay. So I said, let's start with your name, where you live.
When that kind of thing happens, like, does the authenticity of someone being like that kind of disarm you? Like, how many people have gotten on a call and said, I don't know what the hell I'm doing?
Like in that particular way, it was so sweet. Yeah, because she was so genuine and so honest. There are plenty of people who get on calls with me and tell me that they're nervous. So I typically will pick up one of my animals and be like, look, I love my cats and dogs. I'm just a person. Now we can have our conversation because now I'm just a person to you and not like some sort of,
like,
I don't know, figurehead of something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, this young woman gets on a call with me. I'm sort of guiding her through how to do this call. And I asked her, I was like, well, have you started working on this? And she, oh, yes, no, absolutely. And from, she's got her laptop where we're having this Zoom call, and she picks up something and she brings it in front of the computer, and it is this hyper realistic leopard head. And it's really well done. Like, there's particular types of stitching that you can do so that each side is pulled accurately. And she's talking about how she's doing it. And I was like, wait a second, how many of these heads have you made? She's like, this is my 20th one. And I was like, oh my God, she's an engineer. She just happens to be doing it in crafting. And I've been mentoring her for a few months now. And every time I talk to her, I'm completely blown away because she's talking about making, like, she makes her own essentially like architectural plans that she then pulls into materials and sewing and the craft. And then it was so interesting. I was talking to her recently and also talking to her mom, and they're trying to figure out, like, okay, where are these skill sets going to go? And I was saying, yeah, she is an engineer. She happens to be putting it into this like very interesting area. And then actually the young lady brought up, she's like, yeah, I've been thinking about actually like bioprinting. I've never really gotten to talk to anybody about it. And I'm really curious about it. And I was like, I have people you can talk to in this area. And so I'm going to make those connections happen. But those kind of stories of like, young people who have a really unique passion who need some resources to move something forward, that's where I get really, really interested. Sometimes those things end up turning into startups and we work with people more and give them more resources. Sometimes it stays as a project and that's totally fine. And we want the Medici project to really be a learning opportunity of like, hey, this is a chance to learn something and we get to learn alongside you in that area. So it's really special. It's really, really special when we get to offer it to people who don't even know that we have the Medici project. Because there is that genuineness. It's this magical moment of like, cool, I'm going to tap you on the shoulder and give you this like neat thing. And so we love doing it.
In my experience, a lot of these, especially like the starting journey of most companies and most like, especially if you're doing something that's outside of the norms, it's just a whole lot of no's. And if you talk with someone and they just like kind of believe in you, it's a very surprising and like it kind of throws you off. You're like, well, wait a second, it just worked. What do I do now? Like, I don't know. I've been rejected so many times. What the hell happens now?
I even wonder if what happens in people's minds, if it's sort of this moment of like, I'm not crazy. Like someone else thinks I'm right on about something. And you know, I think we're social beings, and that getting that nudge from someone of like, hey, try this out, give it a go. Like, yeah, sounds crazy awesome, not just crazy, like, let's do it, is really important. And I think that we would see people building and creating things at younger ages if we offered them that encouragement, and even encouragement to be eccentric in their interests and to go really deep. I'll never forget this one tweet over the pandemic. This big sister tweeted something like, my little brother is so bored that he's just playing guitar all day. And I thought, like, that's not boredom, that's motivation. Like, that's what we need to be looking for in people is when no one's watching, when you don't have to do something else, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing just for fun? And where do those interests lead you in the future? And we need to encourage it and not just think of it as like, oh, well, that's, it's not academic. It's not going to be for a job. It's not going to be for school. It's not for a credit. It's not for LinkedIn.
My thinking is, you know, you're catching most of these people, you know, especially like 10 years ago, you're catching most of these people when they're 17, 16, 18, whatever. But ideally, I'd imagine that you'd want to catch them pretty much as early as possible. So they don't like learn the wrong lessons in the first place and have to unlearn them, and they can just learn the right lessons from the get. And so how do you kind of like design something where you're kind of finding that random individual in the middle of nowhere, maybe even when they're like 6. Some crazy young age.
True. It's true. So I am mentoring an 11-year-old right now. He came to me as a 10-year-old, and he came through. So our community, it's like tendrils. It's like people know when they've spotted a 15, 17er out there in the wild, and they'll often come tell us, hey, I met this young person. They're totally incredible. You have to talk to them. And that's what happened. One of our, I'm pretty sure it was a grantee of ours, came to us and said, I met this young man. You have to talk to him. He's 10. And I was like, okay, yeah, sounds great. No problem. And I used to be an educator. I started a charter school based on homeschooling principles. I worked with homeschoolers for a long time. So working with children is a big passion of mine. And I got introduced to this young man, and he's really interested in chip design. We have a company that works in chip design. They're both in Toronto. So I set up like a field trip day for him where he went and he got to go geek out with this founding team of people. He is actually working on a robotic mouse now. And so he's become a grantee with us. And it's adorable. He's so excited about everything he does that he literally bounces when he talks. He's a little boy, you know, and he has that little boy energy. And I've been telling him, I'm like, his name's Ian. I'm like, Ian, never lose that bouncy, that like excited energy that you have and that passion, like keep that going. And it's incredible to see that. And so we do think about like those earlier ages. We haven't built in any programming yet. We do have a camp we call 2E that's for ages 14 to 18. But I do have parents that write to me, not all the time, but on a somewhat regular basis of, hey, how do I help develop these things? I've been really pushing Montessori on Twitter lately.
Can
I
you
think
actually like
it's,
talk about like what is Montessori? Because I know
yeah.
Sam
So
did that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so Maria Montessori, I think, is the most underrated philosopher. She's gotten bucketed into like educational theory, but I really think that she's a philosopher. She has the most um, deep gravitas for the human condition of anyone that I've read. And when I first read one of her books, The Absorbent Mind, almost 25 years ago, it just changed my whole view about how you might like treat a young person with reverence and respect and just awe
And responsibility or
and responsibility, and treating them like
authority.
someone who has agency and someone who can contribute. Um, and so I think that top layer is actually the most important. I think a lot of people think like, oh, Montessori is about that there's maybe some different choices in the classroom and children can pick and choose. And like all of that is wonderful and true. But if you don't have the like non coercion and the respect piece and treating that child with reverence and in awe, you're not really doing Montessori at that point. Um, and there's that responsibility piece of, bringing them into the fold of, hey, what are we doing here in this environment and how do we treat this environment, and giving them access to resources that are literally at their level so that they can go get them and they don't always have to ask a teacher for something, or even things like, okay, we put the water container low so they can just go get water and don't have to ask anybody for something. So it's like building in um, I wouldn't even say building in agency. I think it's just retaining the agency that humans already have instead of, again, putting a system on top that takes away agency. So I think what Montessori noticed was the natural human condition. And she was really good at figuring out, like, how do we keep harnessing that instead of how do we make everybody kind of line up and be the same?
Right now, you can't necessarily change the entire track for
Mm-hmm.
young people,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd imagine like what would something like that look like with the optimal childhood for someone going from 0 to
Sure.
18
Sure. Sure.
to nurture the things that you care about?
So I think at heart, I'm personally like an unschooler type. And unschoolers typically are really child led in how they do things. So they're thinking about not just what is good for the family, but what is good for each individual child. And, my own godchildren are an interesting example of this. They live next door to me, so I get to be with them and interact a lot. And, any multi child household will tell you, like those parents will tell you, each child is completely different than the next one. And so what works for one child is not going to be the thing that works for the second or the third or the fourth. Um, and so what I'm not saying is that, every single 5-year old
This
should
is the
start at
one mold.
Montessori and it's the one
Yeah.
thing, because it might not work for the third kid in the family. You have to kind of figure out, when I think about my godchildren, the oldest likes structure and like thrives in it. So she's in a program that has more of that. The middle child is more of like a nature outdoor school type of kid. And so she does something like that. And they're making some decisions for the current 4-year-old, who will be enrolling in some form of school later. What my friends have told all the kids at this point, and it's funny, I keep saying kids, and I have this funny thing about the word kids. When it's your own kids or your friends' kids, I think that word is fine. When we're talking about young people in like a more like professional capacity, I use the term young people. Like I would never call the people I work with kids, or even the teens who come to our camp. I don't call them kids, but I call my grandkids. I don't have grandkids. I call my godkids kids because they're like part of my
You have
family.
like a different
It's a
relationship with
different
them, and I
relationship.
think that like young
Exactly.
people think of like a different type of respect, but
Exactly.
it's a little
I
bit like
don't
calling someone dad. It's just
exactly. I don't need to give like hierarchy to the people that I work with. And I don't think it's hierarchy when I'm talking about my god kids. It's that relational thing there. But they've told the oldest that she can start homeschooling potentially like in a year or so when she's 10. And she's super excited about it. She's like, okay, cool. Like, and at first they were thinking maybe 12, but actually, like, they're just sort of watching like what her needs are and where she might thrive, and thinking about, okay, well, yeah, maybe 10 is the right time. So I think it's about each family figuring out what the right fit is for their family and the children, and going from there. So though I'm a big proponent of things like Montessori programs, and there's Montessori charter schools out there too, I'm not into one size fits all for really anybody.
Yeah. I've heard the saying that like bad boards can kill companies.
Oh yeah.
And I think that probably has a similar impact on like bad advisors or bad people that are giving young people advice.
Oh sure.
Can really hurt people,
Yep.
but it can also extremely help people.
Yeah,
It
of
can like
course.
put you forward, put
Yep.
you backward. What do you think the role of like
Mm.
that early believer is,
Mm.
and what isn't it?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, the early believer can look many different ways, right? Like that early believer can be someone who's encouraging. It could be a mentor who shows you the ropes in something. It could be a funder. The way that I see that early believer maybe like working with someone best is to, yeah, kind of like help that person figure out their path, and like, hey, where do you want to go with this project? What's next on it? Um, who are other people, resources that I can bring to the table for you, and like expand your thinking here? Or like maybe it's not even expanding the thinking, but hey, this person can jam on you with this idea. Like I think those types of things are really, really powerful early. Um, the type of mentorship that's like, I'm older than you, I know how to do this, you should do it the way I say it, I think is not great. I'm much more into like the Socratic dialogue, and um going through an experience with somebody instead of saying, well, hey, I have the experience. The way you get experiences by doing things the way that experienced people tell you to. And then from there, at some point, there's sort of this notion that sometimes certain mentors, but I think a lot of systems tell us to wait. Like, oh, you have to wait until you've done this amount of tutelage before you can do it on your own. And I think sort of anyone with that kind of like attitude is not a great, I don't think that person's really a believer. I think that person may be more in it for the kudos for themselves of like, oh, look at me, I'm mentoring or something like that. But someone who can take a back seat to the mentee and help them explore something and get further. I mean, that's a great mentor.
I think like as humans, we have this natural desire to give advice, even if the advice that we're giving is bad. And
Oh yeah.
we don't know that it's bad. Typically, most people don't give advice that they know is bad, but sometimes
Right.
they do.
And the advice we're giving is often like a self-projection of, well, this is what I would have needed, so I'm going to say this. And I'm always careful when working with founders or mentees or anything. I'll tell them what hat I'm wearing. I'm wearing my investor hat right now. I'm wearing my Danielle hat right now. I'm, I don't know, wearing my educator hat right now. And like, here's where some of these perspectives are coming from. And we always tell people that we work with, you're the captain of your ship. We're kind of the navigator where we're looking ahead and we're trying to tell you some things that we see. But at the end of the day, you're the captain. Like you make the choice and you make the decision. It's hard over time though, because sometimes you see certain things where you're like, please, for the love of God, don't do that thing. I've seen a million people crash like
into the
rocks. And I had that moment today, actually.
Yeah.
We do something on Fridays called Coffee and Troubleshooting with our founders, where just totally optional, people can jump on a call. It's with our staff and also with founders to talk about, what people are working on, since if they haven't, cross-pollinated, since we have so many teams we work with. And then it's a win and or a troubleshoot. And today someone was asking about crowdfunding, and I should probably write her an email later and be like, all right, I was a little aggressive earlier, but she's like, yeah, what about a crowdfunding campaign? And I was like, no, like you're going to overpromise and underdeliver. This is what happens with everybody. You're going to have an angry mob of people at you. And like the only time you should do a crowdfunding campaign is when you have your product, you've like gotten your manufacturing down, and you're using it as basically an advertisement. Like that's like the only time this works. Usually I'm like a bit softer with my feedback, but this time I was like, no, the rocks, they're right there. You're gonna crash. It's gonna happen. And I think part of it is because we had a founder a few years ago who also was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a crowdfunding campaign. And we were like, no, like danger, rocks ahead. And the founder insisted on doing it. And, you know, they're the captain of the ship. And we were like, okay, have fun storming the castle. Sure enough.
Smashing into the rocks.
Smashing into the rocks.
People
3
overboard.
years later, still waiting for the product to come out. People are overboard. I mean, it's happening. The product is coming out, but it is not the timeline that was originally set. And so I feel like I had like maybe like a knee-jerk response when another founder today brought up crowdfunding, because I'm like, oh my God, save yourself.
Reasonably, you might, you've seen someone smash their head into a wall for 3 years, and then the guy, pops on the call and says, I have an idea.
Right.
And you're like, actually, we've seen this work.
Right. We've seen this before.
Trust me.
We've seen people not listen, and it's really painful.
She's in the hospital. Like, we don't want that to happen again.
Right, exactly.
We can avoid all the next Friday calls.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's one reason why we love getting our founders on these calls to brainstorm with each other, too, is because people who are a couple years ahead of you, you can kind of help, you can learn from them of like, okay, because they're in the same market.
Like, also trust them in a different way than the investors saying,
right.
Do this thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd be curious. So what has been, you give this advice, you're kind of like ideally trying to improve someone's kind of outcomes and also kind of improve their direction and trajectory and all those things. Has there been any particularly memorable moments where you told someone to do something and it really worked? And it was a meaningful, like massively impactful on their trajectory. And has there also been any moments where you told someone to do something or recommended things and it just absolutely went to shit?
Sure. Gosh. It's interesting. A lot of the way that we work at 1517 is really through Socratic dialogue. So it's more like we're doing a review with the founder. Hey, what do you think the next 3 months are going to look like? Where do you think those rocks are going to be ahead? What are the conversations that you should be having with your team that you're not, that you're delaying pain on? Like those types of questions. It's less of the, hey, have you thought of this thing you should do? Like we bring those things up. But I think it's more pulling out of the founder, like where they think something should go. And that dialogue, that style of dialogue tends to be really helpful because it's like we're becoming a brainstorming partner, someone who's saying like, okay, hold on, like you can take your head out of the weeds for at least 45 minutes to an hour and we can like talk about high level how things are going. A lot of times people know that like our expertise are probably more on like almost like the leadership development side of it. And then we're referring them out to founders, whether in the portfolio or people we know who might have technical expertise. So there's lots of different ways where I think this like style is working. And actually, I think one part of the style is just that it's proactive. So with the founders, what we do is we do an onboarding call, first of all. And the onboarding call, I think, is really powerful because what we're telling people is, the big takeaway of the onboarding call is like, holy moly, congrats. Like, we get to work with you. You get to work with us. This is a big moment. It's like rare that this relationship gets to happen. Hooray. And this moment gets to happen because we're delusional. As investors, we have to believe that every founder we're backing could be a portfolio multiplying company. When our fourth fund is going to be 100 million in total. Our last fund was 80 million. Our intention is to 4x every fund we have. We have 4x'd our first fund, actually 4.5. And that's a huge moment to say, like, we believe in you, that you have the ability to potentially get there. Now that's the hurrah. Now there's the next slide, which is sort of this doom and gloom slide. And it's like, And while we believe this in our hearts and our souls to be true, we know the most realistic outcome of any one investment we make is that it completely goes to zero. And this is super philosophically grounding because we're never going to come knocking on the door and ask for that initial check back, that 100K, that 500K, that $1 million check. We're not going to be like, oh, hey, by the way, where is it? Like, we need it now. Or, oh, your company's going
It's
under.
been 3 years.
What return is going to happen? No,
Yeah.
we don't make money off of companies returning a small amount of capital when things aren't going well. We make money when people have extraordinary outcomes. And so what we tell founders in that call is that you got to swing for the fences. And we want them to try as hard as they can at what they're doing. And we would much prefer for them to flame out really, really early and give it their best shot and then move on to something else than like peter out over time, especially because the people we work with are so young. For me, it would keep me up at night if I thought someone was spending time on something that they shouldn't be doing, especially early in their career, because we know success begets success.
Have you had people like that where you were interacting with them? What was that like?
Yeah. We've had founders who are from Fund One, which is 10 years old now, who have been the most armored cockroaches out there, who are like, I have this one founder.
Surviving nuclear blast after nuclear blast.
I mean, he just keeps taking it. COVID nearly shut the company down. Market downturn nearly shuts the company down. This founder actually just recently got a $2 million contract. And part of me is like, wow, that's amazing to see that over all this time. And now it's starting to turn the corner because some pivots that have happened. And I'm keeping it sort of vague because, I don't want to totally reveal on this one. Do I think it was worth all the pain and suffering of like 7 of those 9 years? Probably not. And I told this founder many times, I was like, listen, it's okay. If you want to just like close this out and wrap this up, like no harm, no foul, put it on the shelf, come back to it later. Like, you're early in your adulthood and there's so many things you can do. And every time I would have this conversation with him, he would come back and be like, I'm on a mission from God. This is what I'm doing. I was like, oh, but
that's really hard to argue with.
Like it's still so hard to argue with. I'm like, can't like God call you later for this? Like, I don't know.
After you're 9, should you be questioning the faith?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
I think that part of being a great founder is you kind of just enjoy chewing the glass, especially when people tell you that you're doing the wrong thing.
Well, and Stephen from Lambda Labs, for example, he gave a great talk at our 1517 summit we had last year. And he got up in front of this group of a few hundred young people and he sort of ad-libbed his whole talk. It was awesome. And his whole talk was just don't close the C Corp. He's like, I've had my C Corp for 12 years and I want to keep everybody happy that I've ever worked with in my life. So I kept this open and I've pivoted and pivoted and pivoted. When we invested in Lambda Labs, they were a photo sharing app. And at first they looked like they were doing really well. And then they plateaued and they couldn't figure out how to get out of it. And it was only through sort of a Hail Mary moment where they looked around their apartment that they were in and said, we have the second deep learning workstation. Maybe we could sell that. Like maybe that's the business of this company. They put up a domain landing page. They sold their first computer over Amazon in one day to a guy in Cupertino, and they were in Palo Alto. They put the computer in their car, drove it to this guy's house, sold it to him for $10,000. And they were like, oh, maybe this is our company. And then that turned into like what has become Lambda Labs of today. But his big lesson was just don't shut down the C Corp. And I thought that was interesting. I don't necessarily fully agree with that advice, but I thought it was interesting that he was just like, you just keep going. You're going to figure it out. And yeah, one foot in front of the other.
That sounds a lot like Tony Zhu and like the DoorDash story where they just like throw up the landing page. They're like, I wonder if we can, allow people to order online or whatever. Yeah. They throw up the landing page, which is just like a list of the restaurants, I believe, that were nearby or something that you could deliver from. And it was just the menus. And so someone would call the number on the website and then say, this is what I want. and one of the, I think 5 co-founders would leave their Stanford class,
Yeah.
go to the restaurant, order the food, bring it to the place.
Wow.
And then like, I think it was like cash. Like
Yeah.
they didn't.
That's hilarious. I
Yeah.
didn't know this.
And that was
Wow.
DoorDash. I think that's what
Wow.
they got into YC with,
God, that's wild.
which is crazy. Yeah. Every morning I'm thinking to myself, like, what's the critical path today?
Mhm.
And then I just keep on asking myself throughout the day, like,
Sure.
what am I on that right now?
Yep.
And like, what is the question that you find yourself asking yourself the most? And then also in the sense of the founders that you're talking to, what is the question that you most often are just
Sure.
nailing on?
Sure. This might sound funny, but I think one of the things, there's sort of this like funny thing about investing where you're learning a lot over time, but there's always this question about if those learnings matter. So when we started 1517, we were super beginner's mind. We had never worked at another venture fund. We had no idea what we were doing. And we've made extraordinary returns for our investors. And over time, we've learned a lot. We've seen lots of industries. And so sometimes we end up getting in these debates on the team about market sizing or how hard an industry is. And we're like, is that what we should be talking about right now? Is that the right question? So the question that I kind of like lean back on is I think to myself when I'm talking with people, like, would I have wanted to meet this person in the Thiel Fellowship finalist round years ago? Like, does this person match that kind of irrational, passionate, totally geeky, mutant level vibe? Like, is that there? And that gets me really excited. That's why I'm excited to talk to this young lady about her stuffed animals, because as weird as that might sound, it's like she's got that insatiable.
No one in her life is talking about stuffed animal heads.
No, no, exactly.
She's fully doing it herself.
She's an army of one. Yeah, she's an army of one, high conviction.
She's probably fighting most of the people that she talks with.
I don't know, maybe. But that's one of the things that comes up in my mind is like, is there that just incredible passion present for this person? And then, there's always a question of, sometimes I think about what we do at 1517 a little bit like the Harry Potter sorting hat, where it's like, hey, is this person in our community? Is this person a grantee with us? Is this person someone we invest in? And if so, at what level? Because we've had a lot of people that have started with us on the community and the grant side and then become founders with us. And I think one thing that we're really good at 1517 is watching for progress and development over time. Whereas I think a lot of funds, when they meet someone, they might box something into, oh, this is too early for us, but then somehow they box it into too early forever. And I've seen this a lot when I've tried to refer founders. And in fact, at this point, I think for pre-seed and maybe seed investors, relationship building works. But I think at the Series A+ level, people want you to have the metrics. They want to feel that like, wow, holy moly, now is the moment. Strike when the iron is hot. If you meet them too early and you don't have the metrics they're looking for, what's crazy to me is I'll email some of those same investors, hey, met with this founder a year ago. They've made great progress. Here's the traction. And they're like, oh, we talked last year. We weren't interested. And I'm like, wait, what? But they've changed and they have the progress and they have this. And somehow people just kind of get boxed into that first meeting. So at this point,
what is that like cognitive dissonance, or it's where you have this mental image of the idea? It's like when someone, meets a toddler, right, and then 15 years later they meet the same person. They're like, what the hell?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, it's funny. She passed years ago, but I have an aunt who told me, she said, everyone in my family calls me Danny. She said, Danny, she was in her 80s at the time. She said, here's the weird thing about aging. You're aging, but your mental model has not caught up. And so you'll still think to yourself in your mind that, for her, it was 35. She was like, I'm like in 35. And she was so funny. She's so cute. She's like, I'd walk by a mirror and be like, whoa, who is that? Because that's not who I think of myself as. And so I think we do get trapped in these mental models and with other people too of, oh, this person's the person I met last year. They're not the person of today. And so now I tell founders, especially for Series A and above, you want to talk to people when you've got those metrics, when you're the big fish in the pond, like that's it. Because too often I see people get trapped.
As much momentum as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I, on the other hand, I love to see the growth and the change over time. And I think a lot of that is from my background as an educator. There's nothing more that I love to see than someone who has like developed themselves. And especially because the people we work with are so young. It's like, so encouraging to get to talk to Ian, who's 11, and see like, okay, yeah, I'm so curious, where is he going to be at even in 2 years, let alone like 4, 6, 8, like,
Yeah.
something's going to happen there.
I love this line from Sam Altman, and he says that basically like startups live or die on momentum, and basically the biggest thing that you want to be aiming for is just building momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Companies that win are winning, stay winning, and
Mm-hmm.
companies that aren't winning, you just got to do whatever, scrap, hustle, whatever, to get that first win on the board.
Yeah.
When you're meeting with someone that's just at this project stage, what is that? Is momentum the driver? Is there something else?
No. Yeah, momentum on the project stage, like before they've gotten any form of investment, before they're thinking of themselves as a founder.
Company, but they're starting to, like, you take the stuffed animal heads.
Yeah.
Like, what is the biggest thing that you would want her to just keep on grinding on?
I just want to keep her to keep making. I mean, this is what I would want for like really anyone, like no matter what their age is like keep making and building things and honing your craft. There's something that is so agency giving about, hey, I built this thing. In fact, we have a list of quotes from our founders that we've shared with the campers that we have. That's like, hey, like, what would you want your teenage self to know? And one of our founders, Bruno from Lumint, they're a hydrogen storage company. He wrote, and I think I have it right that it was him who said this, like, build anything, even if it's just a bench, because it will give you this confidence, like the completion of a project. And I think that's actually also what he was getting towards, was the completion of the project, not just starting something, but finishing it will give you confidence that you can't get through any other mode. And I think that's really, really true. And so I'm always encouraging people, whether they're building a project through the Medici project or if they're a founder, it's like, see this through to completion. Like, even if the completion is like, hey, we got to spin this down, you still went all the way through and you gave it all you could. It's an important attribute.
Do you think that you could do something where you almost have like a video game level up system where you say like at each given point you get like unlock more cash or whatever, and then you create some system where it's like do these different projects or like some subset of projects and choose one.
Yeah,
we're going to give you the first $1,000. You go click on it, try to build it.
We kind of think of 15, 17 a little bit in that way. Like, we're not giving people the scaffolded projects of like, these are the things we'd like to see. Michael did write in his appendix on Paper Belt on Fire a list of, and not just a list, but descriptions of all these areas that he wants to see come to fruition. And actually cloud seeding was one of them. And Augustus read his book, and I don't know if he had already been thinking about cloud seeding, but like Augustus actually credits reading this chapter as like, hey, this gave me some of the like, all right.
Was this when he was working on Terra Seco?
I don't know all the timeline on it. This is a few years ago. And then we were the first check into Rainmaker. So it's interesting to see that like, maybe we should do more of that, of like, hey, these are areas that we think are important to put out there to give people some different ideas of things. But I like to think about 15, 17 kind of as this scaffolded method of like, someone has a project, we'll give them $1,000. Some of those projects have turned into startups, and then we've said, hey, maybe like $100K check is the right way to go here. For example, we have this young man, Human from Solcoa, who's here in San Francisco, started as a grantee with us when he was 15, 16 years old, was really interested in extraction of rare earth metals at lower energy efficient cost, and started like creating and making in his parents' basement. We ended up giving him $100,000 investment check to say, hey, you know what? You're coming up across questions you can't answer without more money. Let's give it a go. And so now he has a warehouse facility in San Francisco. He's got a team now. He's coming out with some really impressive stats on what he's doing and starting to go into like larger production. So it's really amazing to see what happens there. And then with our teams, we're always thinking about, we tongue in cheek say at 15, 17 that we're like an ATM machine. The password is traction. And so if you do have a startup and we've started giving you that belief capital of, okay, we want you to get through the R&D stage. Here's 100K, or maybe you have some scrappy prototype and maybe you have a customer and you're doing like a pre-seed raise of maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million. We want to be the people to back the truck up really, really fast. I probably can't say what this particular founder is doing, but we have a founder from our first Flux cohort. This is a sort of a sci-fi program we put together where we knew that some people need an invitation, to like try something. And most scientists wouldn't think, oh, I should go talk to a VC about what I'm doing, because the VC world has not been super friendly to early stage science. So we started this program called Flux, which is a homage to the movie Back to the Future. And what we said is we'll give 100K investment. We don't have the ability to do a 100K grant, but we'll help you get started on something. We have a founder who's working on something very novel at sort of like I'll call it a very deep infrastructure layer for literally everything that we do today. And this founder's making great progress. We said to this founder, hey, you've been making good progress. Like, we want to put in another $1 million, like you're building the team out a little bit. You have these other experiments you want to run. I've been wanting to put another $2 million into this founder for almost 2 months. We're waiting for one more experiment to kind of come through and be done. But like, we've got the money reserved. Like it's like in the bank account, ready to go.
Just with the name on it and like ghostwritten letters.
We've honestly, this is a Fund 3 company, and we're at the end of our deployment cycle where we have very little left. And so we have this earmarked for this one team. And so we've had other teams who are like, hey, I need some cash too. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, can we do it out of here? Do we need to do it out of somewhere else? Like, what does this look like? Do we have to say no sometimes? Because we do work on like a power law theory of it's going to be a handful of our companies that are going to be the ones who are going to be able to really multiply this fund. But that to me is like a really interesting way of how we work, of like, if we are working with someone and things are going well, we can continue to work with them for a very long time. We also set up what's called special purpose vehicles for our founders, where I call it ringing the dinner bell with our investors. Those are called limited partners. And with those limited partners, they want to back the truck up and say, hey, 1517 has caught onto something that's doing really well. We did this with our company, Luminar Technologies, that IPO'd in December of 2020. We set up 4 SPVs over the course of a few years before that IPO happened. We've set up 4 SPVs in Lambda Labs as well. And yeah, those vehicles where we have super high conviction of like, this is either going to go to the moon or this is going to go to zero. Like, our investors are super interested in that. And we only create those vehicles for our highest conviction teams and companies.
Yeah. Like, going back to the permission stuff. I think in my own experience from just observation, I think the best thing is you see other people that are your age, or that you can kind of like say, oh, they're like me and they succeed.
Yep.
And you just see that and you're like, oh, well, if they can do it,
Why
they're
not?
no smarter than me.
Yeah,
you know, if you see Elon today, it's like a godlike figure that runs multiple $trillion companies, and it's impossible to live up to that.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at Elon in 1996, he's just like walking into Netscape's office with a suit on.
Yep.
And he like sits on the bench for 5 hours, and then he gets up and leaves because he's too embarrassed to like go up to or anxious to go up to the like front desk attendant and ask for a job.
Wow.
And when you're thinking about kind of that, giving permission to people, what do you think the highest like leverage thing that people can do to kind of, I don't know, get more people to start?
Gosh, I think there's a few things. I mean, one is that I think seeing people do something like, we tend to model what we see in the world. And this is a phenomenon that you see a lot in sports. I can't remember the name of this effect, but it's like, hey, when someone, does the high jump and they do it higher than anybody else, then what happens the following years, typically more people reach that point, and then there's like a new bar that is set. And I think that what's interesting about this is that it shows that a lot of what happens is our own limited perspective on something. If all of a sudden the next year, 3 more people can do that high jump, it's like, okay, well, what really stopped them before? And I think what we're seeing also with founders is we're seeing these great examples of people who, started in their 20s, who are in their 30s now, people like Dylan Field with Figma, people, like Palmer Luckey, obviously. And I think there's a by osmosis process that happens where you can't not notice, wow, this person spent their entire 20s on building and being a founder, and here's where they're at now. And so I think it gives permission to the new generation to say, well, yeah, why not start something at 17, 18, 19, 20? I think that's a big piece. There's a whole ecosystem that has now developed over time, which has been fantastic. I run a program called the Renaissance Reimagined that brings fellowship leaders together to collaborate. And it's great. We had something like 70 fellowship leaders from all over the world, some who are giving cash to young people, some where it's a mentorship program, some where it's community, some where it's all of the above. And those types of programs are really, really great. I think fellowships are actually really big drivers of new innovation. And I think we're also going to see fellowships as new drivers of like culture and the arts as well. That's something I'm super passionate about. And just the ability for young people to apply to these programs is great. I keep a whole grant list of all these programs, and it probably has like, I don't know, over 100 of these programs now. And when I was at the Thiel Foundation, there were no fellowships for young people. There was like fellowships for postdocs, but there were not fellowships for teenagers or undergrads.
It's probably one of those things where you're like filling out, 15 pages of application form on like, here's exactly what I'm going to use the money for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they just didn't exist for those cohorts of people because people thought, no, you have to wait until you've accomplished what we say you need to accomplish before someone will trust you with money. I think this is actually a really like dangerous thing that's happened in society, is that there are systems out there that want to collect the economics of the world. And these are both for-profit and nonprofit institutions that are putting messages out there that it is patently bad to give individuals money, because I think that they know, like, what they're saying is, oh, if you give the money to me, it's trustworthy, but you can't possibly trust other people with money. And I just think that is, it's bad advice. I think, I meet so many people today who are doing direct patronage of just like interesting young people they're meeting, and they're doing it without any credit, without any tax write-up. They're just doing it because they know someone gave them a leg up. And I love to see that. And then some people are formalizing these things, like the Nautilus program started by Zelda Poem. I've known Zelda for a few years now, and it's been really cool to see her package some of these ideas in a way that might encourage more people to give who maybe aren't ready to do it yet on their own. But want to support that ecosystem.
Yeah. When you think about what you're doing at 15, 17, and let's say, 10 or 15 years, you're some billionaire, and money is no longer a constraint, raising other people's capital and like having those incentives is no longer an issue.
Yep.
Actually, let's just do the hypothetical. Like, let's say you have $10 billion in your bank account right now, and you have this mission of you want more people to try and start these things. What is the most effective way? What are the things that you could do now with that 10 billion?
I think what I think about sort of top line, people ask me this question a lot lately of like, what does 15, 17 become? And I think one potential iteration of 15, 17 is that we just become some massive family office. If we were a family office with $10 billion, then I'd be like, cool, maybe we have an investment arm. Maybe we're a fund of funds for funds that back young people. Maybe we're also giving, nonprofit dollars to all these groups that are running fellowship programs. And then we're becoming this massive umbrella for supporting the whole ecosystem. And I think we've been supporting that ecosystem a lot from like a community standpoint. And we have the funding to work with our founders and our grantees. But for example, with this Renaissance Reimagined group, I would love to be able to cut checks to all of these players. Just be like, okay, cool, keep doing what you're doing. I have I've been calling her protege, but this young woman out of Brazil who is working with a group to start a Thiel fellowship in Brazil. And it's like, I would love to give her money and be like, here you go do it. And so I think that At some point, yeah, should we have something like $10 billion? I mean, it wouldn't even take that much. Like, there are ways that we would start doing this much, much sooner.
Is there
Um,
any other constraints on, like, you can't just infinitely scale a community, and you
yep,
kind of lose some of the essence of what makes it special? Like,
sure.
in the early days of YC, Paul
Yep,
Graham's like cooking up
sure.
dinner on a
Yeah, yeah,
Friday or Saturday
totally.
night. And over time, you get further and further away from
Yep,
that. And like those small things kind of make
yeah.
the thing special.
Well, and that's why I would want to fund all these
Yeah.
different programs, because they are each a niche thing, looking for the people they're looking for and working with them in a particular way. Because that is special. Like, the care that people put into something, and the making the dinner yourself. We did that one year for our yearly 15-17 meeting with our investors. Me and Michael both like cooked chicken and vegetables and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. We have enough investors now where we can't make that dinner anymore. So those things are really, really special. And being able to like work with people who can put that level of care into what they're doing is important. And those people are hard to find. There's a lot of people who I think young talent is cool. They're jumping on a bandwagon, but they're using it as a stepping stone to like, I want to become an investor, or I want to be known as a thing. To me, that's very different than someone whose heart and soul is in the game and does it because it's like a calling. Like, I want to find those people where this is their calling, to work with these types of cohorts of people in their specific nuanced way and give them the ability to do that. Yeah, that would be like my big dream. And like, we've continued to build towards that over time. And I even have like small programs that I've wanted to do. And we've started testing a little bit of some of this with 15-17, but I have a lot of hunches in the art world of, hey, what if we gave grants to artists who are making things? And we've done it a little bit. Like, this like stuffed animal project is definitely in the art realm. But I've wanted to do a project where I just drive all over the Bay Area during a summer, meet tons of painters who are non-degreed, haven't gone the MFA route, and give them $1,000 and tell them, hey, listen, you can use this for rent, you can use this for paint, you can food, whatever you want to spend it on, that's fine. But we're going to do a showcase at the end of the summer. You can bring your current work, you can bring any new work. I'll bring the tech community together, hopefully who will buy a bunch of your work, and like keep supporting these things. And what I'd be curious about is, does someone who starts with $1,000 and a nudge and some belief capital, who's an artist, does that have an effect on their long or medium term? I don't know yet. I haven't gotten to run these experiments, but I have a real sense that it would. So I'd like to do more things in more areas like this, and I'd like to see more people doing these types of experiments.
Has there been anything special about like prolific people? So like when I think of like
Mm-hmm.
Picasso, I remember, do you listen to Founders Podcast at all?
I don't listen to
Okay.
many podcasts.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine.
I'm terrible. I'm the worst.
No, but he did this episode on Picasso, and he talked about basically, I think from like the age of 16 or 18 until basically the day he died,
Mm-hmm.
he made some piece of artwork every single
Yeah.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And almost all of that artwork,
Yep.
no one knows or cares about.
That's
a lot
right.
of it was trash.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
the few pieces of artwork that were like really, really special,
Yeah.
made Picasso is just doing things
Yeah.
kind of leads eventually to you in your mind saying like, well, I've already done these other stuff, this other stuff.
Sure.
Maybe I can do the big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that prolificness and that generative energy, and that discipline of creating regularly, I think that all compounds over time. And you're making me think about Josie Zahner from the Los Angeles Project, which is now renaming to the Embryo Corporation. And when I think about Josie at the top, I think Josie is really an artist and a provocateur. And Josie's medium happens to be in biology at this point. But Josie has had like lots of different things that she has worked on over time, between art projects and tech things, starting the Odin, starting the new startup, and many of these things juggling at the same time. And that's interesting to me. And I've noticed this with a lot of our founders, is that they do have this really big creative maker streak. In fact, we had a founder years ago who put in our founder group chat, hey, I'm trying to earn a little extra money. Here's some art I made on eBay if anyone wants to buy it. And I'm looking at his art and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then it dawned on me, I was like, I wonder who else in here makes art. I was like, hey, who else makes art in here? And a bunch of our founders took pictures of things that they made. Like one of our founders, this guy Marcus from Calwave, which is energy tech company, German guy, he puts this beautiful painting in the chat. And I was like, oh my God, like I had not put this together. Like, of course you all are making these other things and are experimenting because that's who you are. And it happens to be that your medium right now is energy tech or this particular startup you're doing, but it's not your only medium. And we've seen that a lot with the people we work with, that they also tend to be extremely curious about the world and very playful as people. Yeah. And so going back to what we started with, a lot of it is I think that playfulness was not taken out of them. Like somehow they were able to retain it. And I think there's like questions there of like, how is that able to happen? Because those people are very generative and are the types who are going to make a bunch of junk and not care that it's junk. And then they land on, oh, hey, here's my masterpiece.
I would almost think that being prolific has to be directly correlated with being a missionary. Mm-hmm. Because if you're a missionary, you're kind of doing the thing for the thing's sake, and you want to just express this thing in the world.
Yep.
And by definition, if you are prolific and you're kind of doing it maybe when no one even knows.
That's right.
Then you got to kind of be a missionary because you just care about it so much.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't remember who said this, but I either read this somewhere or someone said something to me about this, but like they're like, and I'm sure like both artists and entrepreneurs want to kill me here and be like, no, I disagree. But
everyone has pitchforks.
Right. Yeah. Pitchforks everywhere.
You're
but someone said something
like,
yeah, exactly. Here we go. Boom. Someone said something like, artists create like because they have to create, but it's really for themselves. And like they don't care about what other people think of it. And like that's a really beautiful thing. And entrepreneurs create and they have to care about what people think about it because that's how you find a customer. And so like they're both coming from this generative place, but the like motivations are a little bit different. And what's interesting to me too are the artists who also move into entrepreneurship and like those transitions and how that happens. And surely the entrepreneurs who like move into art, or like, I'm sure that there's a lot of simultaneous things happening there. And you're thinking about, hey, no, this is something I'm just doing for myself versus something that has like this mission or calling to it that I have to get out into the world, which means that it has to resonate with other people. There has to be a response here.
Well, the other nice thing is that we are actually not that different than each other.
No, not at all.
It's kind of like the most magical thing is like music, where if you create a song that you really love, odds are probably there's other people in the world that will like it.
Yeah, exactly. And you find your people.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important piece too, actually, is like finding one's tribe and what you're doing. We've heard the phrase for literally 15 years at this point, I don't get to meet other young people like me all the time. Luckily, we're starting to hear it a little bit less. Because in the old days of the Thiel Fellowship, it was really rare for a young person to find other peers who weren't automatically asking them, what college do you go to? What's your major? Wait, why aren't you in school? And just wanted to talk on the project level. And it shocks me that even today we hear that in our community events of like, wow, I don't get to meet other young people like me. And luckily, like I said, it's getting less because I think there are more opportunities out there for people. But finding people that you can jam with your ideas on who aren't going to be criticizing or going to, be encouraging and interested in maybe a collaborator is just really important.
Let's do the final question.
Okay, cool.
What's the hardest thing you've overcome?
What's the hardest thing I've overcome? Oh, gosh. The thing that comes to mind here is I started a charter school called Innovations Academy. We founded the school in 2006. It took us 2 years to found it, and then we opened in 2008. What I didn't know about 2008 was that we were going through a recession. I was 28 years old. I didn't know anything about global macro. And actually, when we were starting school, before even the recession hit, we had an interview with the Walton Foundation for a grant for the school that we were told was basically guaranteed. It was like, if you've gone through all these charter school steps and you've gotten approved and you have a building lease, you're going to get this $250,000 grant to open your doors. Because the way a charter school works is that you only get money when you have, they called butts in the seat in California. So it's like you have to have your students before you get funding from the state. And the Waltons hated everything about us. So we were doing things sort of in a very startup-y way, but we didn't have startup vernacular then. Me and my co-founder were co-founders. We were going to co-principal. They were asking us who's school leadership, and we were like, oh, well, we're going to co-principal. Well, you can't do that. One of you has to be the one who makes the final decision, who's on top. So which one of it is you? It's going to be you. We're like, neither. Like, we're going to do it together. Could not handle that answer.
And it was one of those situations where they just had some checklists.
They must have had, I mean, I think they must have had a checklist, but also they didn't like things like, we're on a first name basis with our students. I'm not Miss Danielle. I'm just Danielle there. We had a no homework policy. We had a social emotional curriculum. At the time, 16 years ago, nobody knew what a social emotional curriculum was or why you might want to have one in a school. So we just looked strange to them. And especially because we weren't going to have some sort of hierarchy of leadership, it was a no-go on that funding. So we had already signed a lease for a building. We had no students, so we had no money. Yet we still had to make this happen. So I went to a friend's mom and I went to my friend and I told her about our situation. She went to her mom and her mom lent us $75,000. My colleague went to her brother and he lent us $75,000. And we thought we were going to need the money for maybe 4 months. And then the recession hit and we didn't have any way to think about this. It caused a bunch of financial delays in school systems, and it took us 4 years to pay back that money. I could not look my friend's mom in the eye for years. I was like, oh my gosh, Teresa's mom. She actually was someone in global macro. So she really understood what was going on and understood that this was not like us being irresponsible or something like that. And we did pay them back. It did happen with interest, not a ton of interest because they were kind to us. But that was a really hard moment to like not get this funding and then have to say, how are we going to figure this out? Because we literally had, I think it was 130 students who were ready to start and ready to go, but we couldn't open the doors until we had this funding. So we had to go find it elsewhere.
Did that kind of lead you into basically when you give the $1,000 check or even $100,000 check or bigger, kind of really hammering in the idea, this is your money. We're not asking for it back.
Oh, that's funny. No, that time period, I've never thought about it like that. To us, it's more of like this philosophical stance of like, we make money on extraordinary returns, not from someone like eking out some money. And in fact, I was talking to a founder recently who did take money from an investor who knows that they run a fund, and this founder was so scared about not being able to pay this investor back that he took on contracting gigs, paid this investor back, I think $250,000, and wrote to me about it the other day and was like, I don't remember how he brought it up. I was like, wait, why did you pay that money back? He's like, I was so scared to like piss this guy off. I was like, but that guy knows that everything goes to zero, or at least so many things do. And I can't, he didn't inform this founder of like, hey, no harm, no foul. You tried your best and that's it. While this founder was like sending checks. And I just found that totally ridiculous. So for us, it's like this philosophical ethos level thing, but I never tied it back to the charter school thing. Just different place where that comes from.